So our mission in Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. One of our goals at every one of our schools is to create a culture of empathy and support so that we can better understand the perspectives of our students and their families, so we can add and scaffold them and help them in their learning. Earlier this summer, I heard Ryan Danley speak at our Worthington Educators for Justice event. And after listening to him speak, I was able to reach out to him, and we sat down in July and had a conversation and just got to know one another a little bit. You know, Ryan and I have a lot in common. Ryan's a graduate of Worthington Schools. Ryan and I both went to school at the Kilbourne building for a while. We both went to school at Thomas Worthington High School. We both played football for the Cardinals. We both went off to college in Indiana, and we both married Indiana girls. Ryan and I live 4 miles apart from each other, and so we see a lot of things the same way. At the same time, you know, Ryan and I have some differences. Ryan's a black male. I'm a white male. Ryan today is handicapped, and for now I'm able-bodied. And so because of those differences, we see some things through different lenses. You know, this year, instead of me talking to you for 15 to 20 minutes like we normally do, I thought it'd be better for us to have a conversation with Ryan and hear his perspective and hear his story. So Ryan Danley is a 2007 graduate of Thomas Worthington High School. He's a 2011 graduate of Butler University. He's married to an amazing young lady named Kelsey, and he's currently employed by Honda of America. So Ryan, when we met earlier this summer, you talked a little bit about moving to Worthington before middle school and then your 6 years in Worthington Schools. Mm-hmm. Tell me what you experienced as a student in Worthington.
Yeah, so I moved from Youngstown, Ohio after 6th grade. I went to Kilbourne Middle School, and I tell you what, I was met with just some of the most wonderful people. People who went on to become my mentors, great teachers who I have contact with to this day. And you know, actually I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to this community and to the teachers. And I actually have a list of people I wanted to give a little shout out to, if that's okay. So Miss Van Horn, Coach Hayes, Coach Miller, Miss Dentler, BJJ, Coach Cox, Coach Luthi, Coach Hopkins, Mrs. Hazlitt, Mr. Genius, Coach Sparks, Mr. Brown, Mr. DeVore, Dr. Littell, Miss Flynn, Miss Kalila, Mr. Buckley, and George the janitor. And I tell you what, these people all showed me grace throughout my time in Worthington. And you know, I went on to high school in Thomas Worthington, class of '07. Had a wonderful time there. And within the community, it seemed like everyone hung out with everyone. You know, it didn't matter if you were in the band or you played sports or didn't belong to any official group. Everyone kind of hung out with everyone, and that's what I really loved about the community. And you know, while we had our scars, you know, for instance, Cardinal Pride Day was referred to as Freshman Slave Day. I can't imagine that would go over too favorably in 2020, but you can't expect any place to be perfect, you know. And I am forever grateful that I'm a Worthington kid, and feel great pride associated with the people and experiences that I had.
So Ryan, when we talked in July, you mentioned that you graduated from Thomas in 2007. You went off to Butler University from Thomas Worthington, and you know, I think you said that, you know, maybe you weren't prepared for some of the things that you might have to deal with at Butler because of your experience in Worthington. Talk about like what happened and you know, while you were at Butler.
Yeah. So in Worthington, race didn't really come up too often. I was just Ryan. You know, I was just another one of the kids, and you know, people treated me and my friends of color just like anyone else. I may have gotten the occasional comment like, "Oh, like, you know, you talk white," or, you know, "You're an Oreo," things like that. But I think those were, you know, kind of posed as compliments. Whereas when I got to college, it was different. You know, for the first time, I was seeing my race used against me, or, you know, seen as, you know, threatening and things like that. For instance, there was one time I got locked outside my building and forgot my ID, and someone called the police on me because I looked suspicious. Apparently, Ralph Lauren polo and golf shorts makes you look suspicious. So, you know, things like that. I was called the N-word for the first time to my face in college. And I actually had a professor who didn't believe that I got to college without playing sports. He was very dismissive of me and thought I was only there because I had a sports scholarship. But I guess he didn't know that my Worthington education afforded me a full tuition academic scholarship. So, it was just, in college was the first time that my race seemed like it was used against me. Whereas in Worthington, I always felt comfortable. I never felt, out of place or anything like that.
So after college, you're working for Honda of America. You marry Kelsey, and life seems to be going really well for a long time. But in January of 2019, really just a year and a half ago now, you had a really significant accident. What happened?
Yeah, so it was my 30th birthday in January 4th actually, and Kelsey and I had some friends who lived in Canada. And so they're like, hey, you guys should come up and visit our friend's cottage and we'll go snowmobiling. I'd never been snowmobiling, so I was pretty excited at the prospect of going. We go up there, I believe there are 18 of us total, and a lot of these people we hadn't met before, so it was quite the adventure. First day we go out and we're snowmobiling and have a wonderful time. No issues, anything happens. So I'm like, oh, I want to do this again. So I wake up early the next day because I wanted to be in the first group to go out, and we're going through the trails and things, and eventually we get to Williams Lake, which is a small lake near my buddy's cottage, and it's Canada in the winter, right? So it's wide open with fresh powdered snow all over the place. So I'm getting more and more confident as I'm going around the lake, and seemingly there were no obstacles. While there weren't any trees or rocks or anything like that, I'd come to find out the hard way about the new dock that the neighbors had built. Unfortunately, I didn't see it until it was too late, and next thing I know, I came to on my back looking at the sky. My friends were all around me asking me if I was okay, and I really didn't feel any pain at the time, so I thought everything was okay. I'm like, oh, well, let's go back and get the day started and have some fun. I'm like, okay. So then I go to stand up and nothing happened. And I tell you, the feeling was quite surreal. Standing up is, moving are things that you do unconsciously all the time, right? And for that not to happen was very odd. And I'm told that I just repeated, what did I do? What did I do? Until the paramedics got there. They came in about 20 minutes, which was fortunate because we were in the middle of nowhere. And actually, we were kind of so far out that a helicopter couldn't land. They were afraid of the snow kicking up. And so my friends had to snowmobile the paramedics out. They put me on a stretcher, carried me about a mile through the woods, put me in an ambulance, and then took me to the hospital from a helicopter. Actually, the ambulance went to where the helicopter could land. So from there, went to the hospital. I had a life-saving spinal decompression infusion surgery, and that was January 26th, 2019, and that's the last time I walked.
Ryan, obviously since your accident, you've gone through an incredible number of physical challenges. How are you coping with that? How do you deal with that?
It's kind of cliche, but I think about a roller coaster ride when you ask me that question. Lots of ups and downs. So when I first got hurt and I was in Canada, I expected to walk out of the hospital and be okay. I thought everything was going to clear up and I'd be good and we'd be fine. Well, I was there for about 2 weeks before I was stable enough to make the 10-hour ambulance ride back, and didn't walk out of the hospital. So I get to inpatient rehab, and they're like, okay, you have a 4 to 8 week stay ahead of you. We'll do physical therapy every day, and I was doing physical therapy 6 days a week, sometimes for 6 to 8 hours a day, and I gave it my all, and thought I was going to walk out of the building, and unfortunately that didn't come to pass. In fact, we had to buy a power wheelchair because I wasn't strong enough at the time to push a manual wheelchair. But this was in contrast to when I first got hurt. The day prior to me getting hurt, I could bench press 300 pounds. When I got hurt, my left hand was basically immobile, and I couldn't pull a tissue out of a tissue box with my right hand. So while I was happy for my gains, still didn't turn out quite the way I wanted. When you get home, home is supposed to symbolize recovery, right? I'm supposed to be okay, you get back and everything's okay. But for me, home represented a new foreign land. I couldn't reach things on shelves. I had to sleep in a hospital bed initially, and we actually had to build a ramp in order for me to get in the house. So it was tough. But someone said to me at one point, for every situation that you encounter, someone's probably encountered it, and they probably wrote it in a book. And at this point, I was in a deep depression, and I'm like, what else do I have to lose at this point? Let me just explore all I can explore and see what life's about. So I began reading, and I found a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And in it, he describes his experiences in concentration camps throughout World War II. And he talks about how when we can't change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And so that's what I set out to do. I began studying people like David Goggins, who's the only person to complete Army Ranger training, Navy SEAL training, and U.S. Air Force air traffic training, which are the hardest three things in the armed forces. I looked at Rachel Berzinski, who's a friend of mine who's Thomas Worthington class of '07. She had an unfortunate accident when she got shot in the head. She wasn't supposed to live, and it's absolutely a miracle that she did and recovered like she can and like she did. And I looked at her and I was like, man, she always has a smile on her face despite everything that she went through. I looked at these people and I was like, if they can do it, maybe I can. Why not me?
I read David Goggins' book. He's an Indiana kid. So,
yeah.
So when you talked at Thomas Worthington High School, you were gracious enough to come, and we had a Worthington Educators for Justice event, and you spoke, and that's the first time I had really heard your name or heard you speak, and you really talked about how not only did the accident create physical challenges for you, but it really opened your eyes to a whole different perspective. Talk about what you talked about, because it was incredibly profound.
Yeah, so I learned that through this experience, there are people that have a whole set of anxieties and considerations that I didn't have. So when I was an able-bodied person, I didn't have to worry about the heights of tables or the width of doors for me to be able to get through them. The terrain didn't matter too much, if it was carpet or gravel or what have you. Didn't have to worry about parking spots or push buttons on doors, things like that. When I got hurt and I became paralyzed, all of that mattered. I was thrust into a world where I had these new considerations, and with all the social issues going on, I realized that there seemed to be a parallel between those two situations. I think at the core, most people are good people and have good intentions. I think ultimately they just don't know the struggles and other considerations that other people face, and it's just eye-opening to me that I went from one world to the next. I'm like, maybe people don't get to experience that, and I think if they did, then we'd show each other a little more empathy. I think when we don't consider other perspectives and don't consider other people's lives and the things that they have to go through, we rob ourselves of a more clear reality, and we rob ourselves of the opportunity to create a world that's great for everyone. And I think that's a tragedy. And so I think if we were able to consider these other things, we could create that beautiful world and show empathy.
So you mentioned it, but when you came and met with us in July, I thought about the fact that, okay, Ryan's in a wheelchair, so he shouldn't have to come to the second floor, but it never occurred to me to think about the table height, right? As an able-bodied person, I never consider the table height and whether your chair would fit under that. And so it was really eye-opening for me to be able to think about, there's things that as a white male that I never think about, that Ryan, as a black male, does have to think about. Talk about that from your perspective a little bit.
Yeah, so certainly, everyone has considerations that are specific to them that they have to worry about that others don't. Now I have these considerations as a handicapped person. As a black male, I had certain considerations before that would always be playing in the back of my mind. And these were things like, I walk into a store and I wonder if people think I'm stealing. Or, for instance, when I showed up at Kelsey's house for the first time in her one stoplight town, I worried about my safety. I worried would, her parents dislike me just because I'm black. And, that layer of anxiety played on top of the normal anxiety associated with meeting the parents. I wonder sometimes if people think that I got to where I am on my own merit, or if they think that it, was just because of some quota or things like that. So, there's that layer of anxiety that plays in the background. And everyone has these. I imagine, in your position, especially being a white male, you have to be pretty surgical in the words that you use when it comes to talking about these social issues, so your words don't get misconstrued. So I don't want to negate anyone's experience or anything like that. I think us sharing our experiences and our perspectives don't invalidate each other's. In fact, they give us a wider perspective with which we can operate and carry ourselves through the world. So I think that's what it's about.
Ryan, I hope it goes without saying, we just have an incredible amount of respect for you and really for the way that you're using your story for good. And so, as we talked this summer, and then again as I listened to you today, it really helps me understand that our students of color, our students who might be immigrating to the U.S., our students who are handicapped, we all come at things and we look at things through our own lens. And so as we're talking to our 1,300 educators in Worthington schools, do you have recommendations or things for our educators that you would say would help if we did these things as we tried to look and understand things through others' perspectives?
For sure. In fact, I think there's a lot of beauty in the question that you asked me prior. You mentioned that you didn't think about table heights and doors and things like that, but when you talked to me, you made adjustments and you heard me out, you empathized with my situation, and you went forward to ensure mutual comfort and respect. I think that's the key. I think that is what all of our educators could do, and people in the community could do to make things better. In Man's Search for Meaning, there's a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's essentially, man's suffering is like a gas. If a certain quantity of gas is pumped into a chamber, it fills the chamber completely and evenly, no matter how big the chamber. Therefore, a man's suffering fills his soul and conscious mind completely and evenly. And I think it's not our job to assess the level of someone else's suffering. I know when I was in high school, I broke up with my girlfriend of 3 months and I thought the world was ending, and my mom could have looked at me and said, "Oh, get over it, it's such a little time frame in life," but she didn't treat me that way. She showed me love, she showed me empathy, and I was better through the experience for that. So I think that's a big part of it is hearing each other. And I'm a big fan, Honda, of the Deming cycle: plan, do, check, act. So you make a plan, you put it into action by doing, you check and assess and see if it's going on, and then you act accordingly and make adjustments. I believe if our educators went forward with that mindset, the inevitable outcome is improved conditions.
Ryan, as we're talking, I'm getting ready to thank you and appreciate, that we really appreciate you talking. Is there anything else that you'd really want to make sure that you share that I didn't ask you today?
Yeah, I think mindset is super important. When we go into these things, when we are interacting with students, when we're thinking about our future as a community, I think it all has to do with our mindset. I've always been impressed by the Worthington community's mindset as it pertains to being an inclusive environment and things like that. One thing I found in my studies is looking at the Bible and different things. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. I found that instead of focusing on the negative, my life is so much better if I focus on the positive and all the things that are going well. I learned that my mind is like a muscle. If I continue to train it and work at it and continue to focus on the positive, then I'll be in a better place. And ultimately, I think that's what I want to convey. I want to convey to everyone that instead of playing the loop of all the bad things that you think are happening and all the terrible things and focusing on those, look at the good, look at the positive, and I think ultimately we'll look around and find that this is a beautiful community and this is a place that people want to be. I'm forever grateful to this community and all the people I named and even some that I didn't for making me who I am. And I'm very appreciative of you and this opportunity as well.
Ryan, I do. I want to thank you for sharing your story. As the superintendent of Worthington Schools, I think I can speak on behalf of all of our school community and say that we're proud of the work that you're doing. Your ability to use what has happened, frankly, to you, and turn it into a positive for others is really, really inspiring. And so I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
This year in Worthington, we're going to embark on a great challenge. We're endeavoring to educate students in the age of the coronavirus. At the same time, we want to create a more racially just and inclusive school community. I think Ryan has set an example for all of us. He's said yes to the hard things. And that's really our theme for this school year. We want to say yes to the hard thing. You know, Ryan has worked to overcome his injuries. He's said yes to having honest conversations about racial justice. He's said yes when he's, been positive when I don't know if I could be positive in his same situation. Ryan said yes to simple things like having a conversation with me. So this year in Worthington, that's going to be what we all have to try to do, which is to say yes to the hard things. I don't know what this year is going to hold for any of us, but I do know that if we have a positive attitude, if we have a can-do spirit, if we seek to better understand one another and the students and the families that we serve, that it can be a great school year for Worthington kids. So on behalf of Ryan and on myself, we want to work to say yes to the hard things this year. Go be awesome.